Hello and welcome to another Meet the Podcasters Facebook Live. I'm Diane Ray, co-founder of the MindBodySpirit.fm podcast network. And Tina Williamson and I are so proud of the amazing lineup that we have on MindBodySpirit.fm podcast network that we want to introduce you to the hosts. So we've been doing these short Facebook Lives to introduce you to some of our amazing talented people that are podcasting with us. Now, we have over 60 podcasters sharing some information on things like angels, past lives, mediumship, spirituality, intuition, health and wellness, mental health, and a lot more. So we've got a lot to cover, and we have a lot of these Facebook Lives to do. So thanks for tuning in today. We're always on the lookout for people to join us. If you'd like to check it out, you can always email us at info@mindbodyspirit.fm through the website if you want to find out more info. So I've worked with some incredible spiritual teachers over the years, and I love to introduce people to their work, but I also like to keep my eye out on new people and new teachers that have great messages to share. So I'm excited to introduce you to the teacher today. The host that I'm introducing you to, that I'm talking with, is Jacob Cooper, and he's the host of the Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder podcast. And Jacob is a licensed therapist, so he works with people individually, and he also does past life regression, Reiki. He works with people with PTSD, and he's written two incredible books, Life After Breath and The Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder. And Jacob shares what he's learned from his near-death experiences as a child, and he incorporates mindfulness and a spiritual approach to help people, so he weaves all of this together. And Jacob, thanks for joining me today and talking about this.
Oh, Diane, it's such a pleasure to be talking with you, and to be a part of a wonderful and growing community here on MindBodySpirit.fm.
Well, we're excited. Like, we were so happy to bring you on. You and I have spoken before over the years on Unity Online Radio. And when we were building MindBodySpirit.fm, I was hoping that we could work together again. So as luck and fate would have it, here we are. So tell me what you enjoy most about doing the Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder podcast and the YouTube channel and just presenting your message to people all over the world.
Great question. As always, Diane, I always love getting interviewed by you because you're always spot on. And I don't know if it's intuitive or experience or a little bit of both. But what I really enjoy is is an inner and outer enjoyment. I enjoy it on a personal basis where I'm able to really learn something new every single week from the guests that I have. And it's just kind of like free insight for myself to be in their presence. And I also learn growing as someone, who's been a therapist, but is still fairly new to the art of, interviewing others. Like, I'm not a journalist or something like that, but learning really how to refine my skill. But what I get most enjoyment out of is some of the emails as well as the comments that people do share, the conversations that we were able to partake in, and how that impacted their days, their weeks, or who knows, maybe even the trajectory of their lives. So to be a part of that is to me everything, and that keeps me going.
And going from being a therapist to putting yourself out there in a podcast and also on YouTube, I mean, was that scary to take that first step? What was the catalyst for that to get you going?
Yeah, I mean, everything's a little bit slow and resistant to change, including therapeutic practice. I mean, when you think of being a therapist, what do you think of? You think of behind closed doors, it's very confidential and it's very private. And so, throughout years, a lot of therapists would be doing great work, no one really watching, and it was very much private. But now we're living in a new world, there's a new media, and you're seeing more people from different professions coming out of their woodworks to create more accessibility to the public so that they could really learn and grow from you directly without necessarily having to come into your office or book a session. And I think right now it's something that you're seeing across the board where there's more accessibility to information, to people. And I think all that is a healthy and good thing. We live on information. That is everything in our world, and why not be a part of a good trend of information?
Right. No, I agree. I mean, I'm trying to dive into it myself. Get
Yeah,
myself out there. I'm an old radio gal, so I'm used to being behind the mic and not in front of a camera, showing your face everywhere. So it's
Yeah.
definitely a new world.
Oh,
But
yeah.
did you notice that, post COVID, I mean, things totally changed. And
Mhm,
especially with therapy. I mean, first of all, people needed therapy
mm.
a lot, and they still do. And using something like this video, and even using the podcast to kind of get your message out there, how has that been, just kind of growing since then?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it obviously helps, to, maybe connect with others. And that's the beauty of, this little screen that we're in here. You just never know who's watching. It could be from where I am in New York to New Zealand and Australia, like we've had. That's the beauty of putting things out there. But yeah, it just allows people a lot more of a wider net of information. And so at least for myself, I work in the field of mental health, but I'm also a trained social worker, clinical social worker. And what people have to understand about social work versus psychology is just how social work works with systems. It just doesn't have someone coming into your office and they leave. Let's say someone's having a difficult time with accessibility or paying the bills or getting transportation. So, social work really works with all the systems. Now, this really is congruent with the work that I do, which is, in terms of podcasting, which is increasing the, uh, I would say the reach of the information to make it more accessible to others. We don't have to pay, X amount of money that you don't have to get great information. And so it's just one of those ways of giving back to increase the net that we're able to cast and to invite all those to be included in this conversation and to not be excluded.
And you do a lot of speaking engagements. I know you've been out recently talking to people about healing from grief and that there is a continuity of consciousness after physical death.
Mhm.
And you also work with people who may have anxiety about life after death or fear around this. And why are you so passionate about this work, helping people to get over those fears?
Great question. Many different reasons. I would say there's the personal and the professional are very much tied in, but certainly having my own personal NDE gave myself a window, as to what goes on, what happens when we have a bodily death. And so for years, I kept that buried, I kept that hidden, but it didn't do anyone any good. And I know once I recognized that it was appropriate to get it out there, that I was ready, that others were ready, it became a great pursuit. And but for many to really find a sense of purpose, you have to find your joy. And it's also part of that joy could be rooted in a labor of love or some pain. And there was certainly some pain in having what I had and the trauma that I experienced and just how complicated it made my childhood. But I wanted to help people to avoid those pitfalls and to take people with me and to understand that you don't just go through something just for yourself subjectively. You're here to go through something to really make that ripple effect to those that you may encounter. And so that is a really big impetus and motivational factor behind the work that I do, and to recognize, uh, just how powerful again beliefs are in behavior or outlooks. And so that same kind of cognitive behavioral therapy work that I do to reframe one's thoughts to change your behavior is something that I try to do when it comes to grief and afterlife awareness for my own professional and my own personal experience, in their own unique vantage points.
So when people come to you for help, do you think they seek you out because they know you've had these kind of experiences or that you're open to talking about spiritual topics or spirituality in this way? Because I know sometimes in a professional setting, people might not feel comfortable bringing that up, or they might think their therapist isn't
Mm.
open to it or that kind of thing.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I've heard just horror stories throughout, my own practice of people. Again, my line of work is just you just never know where someone's at, what they may be going through. They may feel like they're in many ways just drowning, and to push them down even further in a professional role, you're just you're not a professional therapist. You're just like someone who's professionally good at making things worse, or it's just almost abusive. So um you want to be a professional. You're there to help people, to uplift people, not to make matters worse. And so, I think that does help that people understand that I'm cognizant of what they're going through from a personal and professional experience. And that leads to more understanding and acceptance. Plenty of people are used to people pushing them aside and judging them, condemning them. And that's the very last thing that I ever want to have to happen in my own practice. And so, yeah, most people are looking to be heard and understood. And you have to have the education or the direct experience in order to be able to do that on a deeper level.
Well, you're so compassionate. I can tell just by talking to you and by listening to your podcast, you have a lot of empathy for people, and that really comes through on the show. And you've
Thank
interviewed
you.
so many amazing people. I mean, people that I'm fans of,
Yeah.
like Lorna Byrne, working with angels, and
Mm.
Neil Donald Walsh, and Dr. Linda Backman that you just did a recent show with. And I was hoping you could share maybe, something from a past interview that was really impactful, or a guest that you had that was, just mind blowing? Anybody that stands out?
Well, they're all gems. Like anyone on my
Yeah.
show, I first started the show with the intention of, like you said, having it being empathy ruled and compassionate rule. That's where I wanted to lean into and lead from. And so we had Elizabeth Bossan from Helping Parents Heal, who I handpicked as my first guest. And I know so many people, but she's just someone who really sets the bar when it comes to empathy and really living that piece in her life and the great work that she does with the organization Helping Parents Heal, which, I've been a presenter at, and I just presented at their Phoenix conference, and it's a great program. But I think some of these guests that I have, I just grew up, looking at their books in the library and just seeing their smiling faces in their books. And, I sometimes would go to places in the middle of nowhere and see these same faces, in these libraries. And all of a sudden you just turn on that button and they're in front of you. Yeah. I mean, there's a human element that I have where I get a little bit fanboyed out and I'm like starstruck. And I'm like, all right, catch your breath, relax, just remember they do the same things that we do. No one's any better, but that was really cool from a personal basis. But once you get like a minute or two and you recognize like they're special, but at the same time, a lot of them aren't caught up in ego. They're doing what they do to empower others to see what others see in them to see in themselves, kind of like what Jesus was about. The kingdom of heaven in me is in you too. And so um, that's been great from a personal level. But again, I think the thing that most stood out was Neil Donald Walsh. When I interviewed him, you know, and I love Neil, and we have a beautiful, profound connection. Through many different reasons. But Neil, A was mentioning that great point that I was talking about, the association of beliefs and behaviors in a sense, Neil, if you're not familiar with Neil, he just kind of hit rock bottom and just wrote kind of this venting letter, to God, this angry letter at God. And then, all of a sudden God said, are you you're just wanting to complain, or you wanting to vent, or do you really want to know the answers? And so all of a sudden it was channel dictations of his books, Conversations with God, not produced, published by Hampton Roads. And he had actually the same agent that I had who just passed away, Bill Gladstone. But Niels mentioned the association of belief in God and behaviors, and how, our own connection towards ourselves is reflected in how we view God and vice versa. And I thought that was profound. And also something that he shared on the Matt Lauer show, where he was asked, just kind of one quick thing that people would want to know about God. And Neil, and I saw this, he said, on the Matt Lauer show and the Today Show, he said, "You got me all wrong." And regarding God. And so
Yes.
I think that was a pretty cool moment where, it was cool, but it was also very um it was very helpful to just understand that it is possible that we could reframe our beliefs in God, and the power and influence that it could have in our everyday life. But so many different moments that I've had without guests that it's very hard to really pinpoint. But those are just some that stand out to me.
It is. It's hard to pick a favorite when there's been so many great ones. I know
Yeah.
that's true. And Neil is such a powerful speaker with so many great ideas. And I just love the idea that he's sharing that we all can have that kind of close relationship with spirit and have those
Mhm.
conversations. You don't have to be some special, psychic or have crazy woo woo powers or anything like that. It's something that is innately within all of us. And I think he brought that down to earth for a lot of people because he's regular guy that's been through a lot of things that we've all experienced. Many people have had hard times. And so I think that's why his message resonated, with so many
Oh,
people. And
oh
it
yeah.
made it easier for me, try to listen to that voice. And I tell people, I think that sometimes if I'm trying to have that kind of conversation with spirit, it sounds like Hal, the voice on 2001 Space Odyssey, even though Hal has kind of an evil character, evil computer,
Mm,
but it's just a very calm voice. Like,
mm.
no, Diane, you might not want to do that silly thing or whatever I was thinking of doing. Don't send that
Oh,
email.
oh yeah, yeah. And I think really, um, that's what attracts others to maybe, let's say, to teachers or to guides is, not necessarily the word salads that you throw out or just how heady it gets, but more
Yes.
so the heart-centeredness of it. And you could tell with the radiation of the voice in terms of where it comes from. And Neil, you could tell it's really vibrating a lot from that heart center, and it's very warm. It's very compassionate, very funny man too. He's very silly as well. Like he's got a good sense of humor, which to me, that's what I gravitate to. I think you have to be like a human being, approachable, have to have a serious side, but also kind of know like to be childlike and funny and silly, and not take this all too serious as well too.
Right, that's so true. Of all the people that I had worked with in the past, and Dr. Dyer, you wouldn't think is a funny guy, but he
Oh,
could be very funny.
well, it's funny you mention him. He's someone that I really connect to on the other side very strongly, and absolutely when I do connect his energy, it's similar to Neil in a way, like very wise, but also kind of like not mischievous, but kind of like playful. Kind of like older sibling kind of vibe. Kind of busting your chops, but in a good way, and just but very compassionate, very empathetic. Um, and just someone who like you could see in the middle of nowhere and they'll look at you as if you're the first human being that they've ever seen. They're just so curious in you. And you're just like, who am I for you to be talking to me? And so your perception of them is different than how they interact usually with you. And that's spirit. Spirit is not about the ego or about judgment. It's about understanding and empathy and seeing the full range of the beauty of the soul, not, you're not judging it or condemning it to a downsized version of what it truly is.
Right, that's so true. I mean, in between doing your podcast, The Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder, keeping you busy and you have patients, full-time therapy patients. So what else do you do for fun? I know you're a music lover. I saw you're posting it. You went to a James Taylor show.
Oh,
Do you
oh,
like
that was.
music?
I do. Yeah, I'm selective, but more like 60s and 70s, a little bit of 80s too. I absolutely am a music lover from a plethora of standpoints, but just from a lover of the brain and one who studies the brain. It does wonders, regarding, relaxing the brain and getting into those deeper, depending on the style of music. Some music could be more uppity and, get you more in those kind of like beta waves. But yeah, I like the music that kind of gets me in that cool California alpha waves and just feeling relaxed. But yeah, I'm very sensitive to sounds, and hertzes and stuff like that. So I do listen to actual music, music with words, but I also like to listen to meditation music. One of my good buddies who I've had on the podcast, Stephen Halpern, is one of my favorite guys to not jam out to, but I just kind of get into a zone with, as well as this gentleman named John Siri, who makes this kind of like outer space kind of music. So music is one of those things. I love to exercise. I'm a big avid runner. That helps me to stay focused before almost any show. I try to go on for a long distance run, get a good sweat in, so I'm focused and all of my neurons are just firing off and in flow. And I'm also, most people don't know this about me, a big sports fan, and I'm
Well, you're in New
just
York, so you've got all the
I,
great teams.
well, I we do, but the one team that I follow the closest is just having the roughest time is the New York Jets, and my God, talk about a lesson of unconditional love. That's something I've learned with watching this team. I mean, they give you almost nothing, and you have to give them all of your time, everything, and you're just always ends in suffering. As we say, JETS, just end the suffering. Yeah,
Well,
but
that's
but I
great. I
still do
mean,
it.
I love
Uh,
to know what people are into and what they do in their spare time. And it's funny, I like ambient music too. And I remember going
mm,
through some really stressful times
mm,
with the death of a parent. And there was a particular Stephen Halpern tune. I don't even know if you call it a tune, but like a piece of music. And I would
mm.
play it over and over. And it was just like this ambient om. And it was so calming. It was like one thing that could really calm me down.
Oh,
And when I was younger, I would have laughed at myself like, oh, listening to that kind of, just ambient music. But now I walk to it. I seek it out.
oh, I'm so glad you do that. Yeah, yeah. Steve, he grew up the town over from me, where we're both kind of like Jewish boys from Long Island. Now I think he's out is in Hawaii or California, something like that. But yeah, I've had Steve on the show, and man, again, just a very kind. He's very, very energetic. You'd think he's like very like no, but
Laid
he
back.
can be. He can be, but he's got that New York side too, where he, has a lot of energy, and he's there to serve and there for a mission. And he's been doing it for several decades.
Years.
And his music, you go on Spotify, it's always at the top of the charts for a reason. So yeah, I recommend all my clients to listen to his music for healing, a walk like you do, and yeah, it can really help out with those dark moments as well. Just to let out a good cry if you need to, or just to feel like you're being felt or heard when you don't have that around you by the spirit realm. So Steve's great.
That's great. It's great you're friends. I think that's cool.
Yeah.
It's been
Yeah.
so awesome to talk with you and chat with you on this Facebook Live. And I know you've got some great shows coming up in the works. I'm sure you're busy with those. So I want to encourage people to subscribe and follow the Wisdom of
Mm.
Jacob's Ladder. And they can do that right from the website at mindbodyspirit.fm and also find you on all the podcatcher apps. You're everywhere. You're on Apple, Spotify, iHeart, you name it. They can just look for the Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder and get all of your shows. So I want to thank you so much for joining me today and letting people get to know you a little bit more and to be aware of your podcast. And we're so happy and grateful that you're with us on the network. So I want to thank you. And also, I want to thank all the people watching and listening. And please check out all the other amazing podcasters that we have on the mindbodyspirit.fm podcast network. Thanks,
Thank
Jake.
you.